started as far as the agenda goes, I would like for especially people that have not been here before to know who all is sitting at the table up here so that we kind of understand the process. So I'm the chair, Elaine Schwartz, and to my left is Representative Councilman Jeff Cohen. And Megan, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Megan Battenberg. I'm with the City Manager's Office helping to staff this committee.
Okay.
Nikki Lee, Budget Manager.
Brandon Kaufman, Chief Fiscal Officer.
Mary Feeney, Deputy City Attorney.
Thank you. And we have the city manager sitting over to the left of us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I think Councilman Jensen was supposed to be here. In fact, he's coming right through the door as I speak. So we'll wait for him to get settled in. So we have the three of us for the committee meeting are present this morning. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Move to approve.
So moved by Councilman Cohen. Second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Jensen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign, so it carries unanimously. The third thing on the agenda is the discussion of the process for determining expenditures. And we've asked our financial staff to kind of give an overview of the past history of what's happened with the guest tax. A lot of people that may be here may not understand that it has not been in essence for the entire time the city has been here. We passed it, the city passed it some time ago, and it is a 7% tax on hotel stays, and that 7% was passed to try to garner funding to improve tourism to Topeka. So, Nikki?
Sure. So just a real brief overview to bring everybody up to speed of, like Councilwoman said, where we're at as far as the history of the TGT funding, but also what's already been decided by this committee and the council in the previous months. What we're discussing here primarily is the 1% of the TGT funds. It's a total of 7% in the city of Topeka. 5% of that is really what we consider our primary tourism fund. That budget was set on the May 20th meeting, and the majority of that funding is actually given to Visit Topeka, who then doles it out to organizations to promote tourism throughout the city. In addition to that, there's a 1% that's designated towards sunflower soccer improvements, which was passed a few years ago. And then finally, there's the 1% we're discussing today, which for the previous years has really been focused on, I'd say, historic projects. So what that was that a certain portion of it was dedicated towards the Riverfront Park, a certain portion towards the Great Overland Station, and the remainder went towards a historic preservation fund, which the planning department worked with a tourism committee and this committee here each year to discuss how that money would then be granted out to agencies around the city. So that final 1% is what we're discussing today. This committee has already voted to go ahead and extend that 1% because it is set to expire at the end of 2015. So they've already decided to recommend extending that for an additional 12 years. And that will have to be taken to the larger governing body at a council meeting in the form of a charter ordinance, hopefully around September. And we'll be talking a little bit more about the timing in a few minutes later in the agenda items. So just wanted to kind of frame, I think sometimes we forget what portion of the TGT funds we're talking about, but it is that 1%. We've provided in the last couple meetings an estimation of about how much money that 1% is estimated to generate. So when we make decisions and when the committee decides which projects to fund, they'll be using those estimates that we've provided. I did want to update the committee here that we have up here, we don't have copies for the audience because it's really a working document, but we've compiled kind of a running list of projects that we've heard about, different groups that have come forward in the previous meetings with projects and dollars amount of what they would like to fund. So we have kind of a running list of projects. This is really a working document because what will be decided today is what the official process is going to be. I think what might be recommended is that everybody that's spoken in the past couple of meetings, we've heard you. We have your dollars stubbed in here, but we really believe that probably there needs to be a more formal written process that goes in front of this committee before any decisions are made. But what I will hand out is just for the committee. They received this list via email last week. We did get an update from Sunflower Soccer this weekend with a more specific dollar amount. Before I had a TBD on there. So there is a more specific dollar amount listed in front of you. And again, this is really just for you to see and kind of get an idea of what projects are out there. But once you all set the official process and once we get official recommendations, these numbers may change. Some of them may not apply. Probably more will apply. So this is really just for you to get an idea.
Okay, does the committee have any questions for Nikki? Nikki, I have one question that I kind of wanted to bring out today. This is the 1% that we voted to extend, but there's also another fund with that has been collecting money for the Riverfront Park. So can you tell us a little bit about that fund?
Sure. So in the 1% that we're discussing, part of that designation was to put money away. It was $106,000 each year towards the Riverfront Park project. And we actually have a project fund set up in the city that has been collecting those funds. And we estimate that at the end of 2015, there would be about $800,000 in that project that could be spent. So that's a very good point that we do actually already have money set aside for the Riverfront Park. And it's my understanding that as soon as there's a project in place and everybody agrees on how that can be spent, that it can really be expended whenever everybody is ready.
And does that 800,000 then end this year? I mean, the collection that goes into that fund, is that still, that ends this year then?
That will end this year unless this committee recommends that some of that 1% continues to be added to that project.
Okay. Well, I think then we're ready to begin discussion about the process itself, and then we will open it up for public comment, after we decide if there is going to be a formalized process for applying for the 1% funding. So I have had some communication with staff before this, and I do think we do need a formalized process, whether it's a form or an application or a letter of intent. Something that would indicate that we have seen a request for some of this funding from those in the city that are intending to increase tourism and garnering more funding for. If we don't have people staying in hotels, we don't receive any money for this fund. So that is the intent of this. So I would open it up for your expressions of how you feel that we should go about determining this 1%. So
I would just throw a comment in. The reason we have this money to spend now is because as a community we've made good investments in the past in our tourism foundation. This is an opportunity to really go to the next level with what our community can offer the guests that are coming in. And all of this money is here because folks have spent the night. And so in all of these projects, all of them are excellent projects. I've heard from a lot of folks, and there's a lot of support out there. In all of it, we need to focus on how do these projects create an overnight stay, or how does a package of these projects create an overnight stay? Because that ultimately is what has given us this money to make these investments. And I feel like in another decade and some change, when another council is sitting here discussing the future of this, if we make good investments now, we're giving them the opportunity to then make good investments. And I think it's critical that we remember that this money is only generated when folks spend the night. And so as people apply, be cognizant of, if your project is there but it doesn't generate an overnight stay, then it's not creating a return on this particular part of the investment. Now, it's absolutely possible that it would create return on a different investment, or create a different type of return, I'm sorry. If someone goes and buys a meal at a restaurant, they're paying sales tax, and that arguably is also a return on the investment. However, that doesn't replenish our ability here to, in a decade or so, fund another round of tourism improvements.
with that in mind, and I don't know if staff has an answer to this question, or maybe somebody in the conferee section, how did it get decided that the Overland Station would get a dedicated funding stream and the Sunflower Soccer? I mean, I'm sure when this fund started, there were many requests brought to the council. There were not any requests brought to the council. Beth, can you fill us in?
Yeah.
You want to state your name first? And
Oh,
and if
I'm
you could
sorry.
come up to the podium, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. I'm Beth Thager. I currently chair the Topeka-Shawnee County Riverfront Authority, but I'm still associated with the Great Overland Station. The idea of a 1% additional transient guest tax came about from actually our staff at the Great Overland Station at the time in 2002 or 3, as we were discussing ways to get the All Veterans Memorial done, the restoration of the station completed. And so our executive director at the time put together the idea and brought it to the council about instituting a 1% additional transient guest tax, because at that time it was the 5%, as Nikki said. And so that was brought to the council, and the resolution was passed that was specifically for approximately half, and the numbers were set, but yes, about 100,000 to the station each year, about 100,000, little more to the park project, because that was always part of the vision of the Great Overland Station too, to see that whole park area between the station and the river developed. So that's how that happened. And then because those were specific amounts, the council decided that whatever was left over after those specific amounts would go to this Heritage Preservation Fund.
So
So that's
you paved the way for those with an interest in bringing tourism to Topeka. So you didn't have any competition, so to speak, for that? It was dedicated
No.
funding?
It was dedicated funding because it was brought to the council by the Great Overland Station. The council approved it for those two purposes, basically. And because it's a large project, kind of an overall community-changing project, to have the riverfront and the station, the museum, all of that together. And of course, a lot has happened since then, too. The Noto Arts District and Rescue Mission expansion, and all of that is working in, and we're all still working together on that north side with all of those projects.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay,
Does that clarify?
thank you, Beth. Chris Meinhardt?
Chris Meinhardt, Friends of Free State Capital here in Topeka, Kansas. If I may, I have really no business affirming Ms. Fagert, but I can. I recall all of that as a citizen and resident at the time. But I would like to elaborate that specifically there were several projects named for what would be the remainder of the 1%. And the only fund by which that potential money could be deposited, it was created, existed at the time, was the Historic Preservation Fund. And that Historic Preservation Fund came about for no other reason than that Constitution Hall had been threatened with demolition. And so at the council at that time named Constitution Hall, Jayhawk Theater, and I'm sure one or two other projects, I can't remember what they may be. But I would just like to state that
So
those
that's
facts
the
as I believe
history.
them. Mhm.
Okay, so the history was we had the 1% requested by the Riverfront Overland Station, and then the excess was to go towards historic preservation. Sorry. Well, I think that kind of gives us a history of what's going on. And what's interesting is if you look at the paper that we were handed, we've got probably 10 different entities that are wanting to partake in that 1%. So that's why we're here today, is to try to determine if there should be a process that we work towards doing. We know that with our social economic funding, there is a grant process that people actually submit grants, but we didn't know if we wanted such a formal process for this, or if it would be just an application form, and if the city would make that form available then, and then people would come up and submit the form, and then the committee, again, as the social economic committee, looks at those applications and then does a scoring system and then determines who would be receiving those grants. So this is really not a grant process as much as an allocation of the funds, correct, Nikki? So, I mean, we would not call them grants, or what would we call it? Just an allocation? Allocation. So with that in mind, I would like to have other people, we've heard from people who expressed an interest in the 1% once we continue that. So is there anyone else that we have not heard from that would like to express at this time an interest in being allocated some of that 1%? I know I see Mike here, so Mike, you want to come up and tell us what you're interested in?
Mike Patterson, historic Harley-Davidson here in Topeka. I think most of you have probably seen the news this weekend with our announcement of the Evel Knievel Museum coming to Topeka. And I feel like it's applicable to this meeting today because the tourist possibilities are great, and the hotel stays are great too for the possibilities of that. That's one of our main focuses with the project. So we're a long way with the process. We've, as I said, if you've read the paper, you've seen where we're at. We did with the press conference that we had on Friday. It was with the story that was written. It was picked up by the AP Wire, and it went national. And we read the story in San Francisco paper, Seattle, Washington D.C. That there was, it kind of affirmed us that there was interest, nationally in the project. We've also we've heard from actually the Davidson family from Harley-Davidson, and they had an Evel Knievel temporary museum, and they're at the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee. And that museum, Bill Davidson told me, he said, "You have no idea what the tourism opportunity is for your city and what this is going to do for your dealership." But he said, I don't think you understand how big it is. And I said, well, we kind of, we have an idea. And he goes, no, I don't really think you have an understanding how big it is. He says, he goes, I do, because we had it. We had the temporary display for 6 months. And he said it wasn't national. It's an international museum. And that in Europe, Evel Knievel is gigantic. We're working closely with the Knievel family, and his son Kelly Knievel just went on less than a month ago on tour in Europe, on TV, radio shows, and then came back and was completely fired up and said, we need to take that truck to Europe. And I said, no, we're not taking it to Europe. But his point was that it was it's huge over there, and I don't think we've ever had an opportunity in Topeka to have a potentially an international attraction that could bring people in. So it's hard for me to come up here and kind of boast about something that's not happened, but these are things that are coming from other people, that we're being told. I'm going to read something here. This came from a person that made a comment on the story, and it came from online, on CJ Online, and it said, this person said, great for tourism in Topeka. I can see it now. Family driving to Colorado with no intention of stopping in Kansas except for gas and food. Dad sees the sign, Evel Knievel Museum 50 miles in Topeka. Dad gets all excited. Mom is shocked at the way Dad is now driving the car, now erratically, while he tells the car of watching his hero on Wild World of Sports. The kids in the back quickly YouTube this unknown guy and see him crash over double-decker buses in London. The family pulls off and has to drive into the city to get to the museum. Once they get in, it's up to all of us to show them what a great city this is. Of course, Dad buys a t-shirt. New money flowing in Topeka is a good thing. See Rock City. So, you know, again, coming from somebody else, but that's kind of our vision. We feel like, and I saw it Saturday too, when we had the truck on display. There was people, an amazing amount of people came down to see it, but I saw this more than once. There was a 40 to 50-year-old dad walking really fast across the parking lot and a kid behind him, not quite keeping up. And it's pretty cool too. I think that there's going to be the opportunity for parents to relive something from their childhood. So we're right in the, I think, a perfect demographic with families. And I think the opportunity to have an attraction in this city where people can come in and relive that, but then explain it to their kids of why it was so important to them when they were younger is a pretty neat opportunity. So where we're at with this for us and why we're at this meeting is, you know, we've gone a long way with this, and we've stepped in really far with the collector Lathan McKay, and we've assisted him with acquisitions, and we've stepped in a long way with this truck and partnered with him on the basically the cornerstone of the museum with the truck. Our plans are into the city right now for permitting for our building. Our contractors have the bids out. So it's not a matter of if we're going to do this, and it's not actually, I don't know if this is the best way to stand at this podium, but we're going to do this. You know, it's not a factor of if we get this money. This is a project that's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. It can't happen soon enough for me. Our plan is to have it open mid-2016. So the reason that we're here is we want this thing to be at an extremely high level. And at this point, for another investor or somebody else to come in with the hands that are in it from the Knievel family and Lathan McKay, there's really not that opportunity for somebody else to see a return on their investment. Obviously, we have to pay royalties, and this man, Lathan McKay, spent in 7 figures acquiring this stuff, and he's looking for a reason why he did that too. So, other than just looking at it. Like I said, at this point, where the opportunity lies for a return on investment is through the transient guest tax and through hotel stays. And we would never ask for a partnership with somebody without the potential for a return on investment. And we feel like where this money should come from, I don't think I would ever accept any city taxpayers' money from a project like this. Where this should come from is people that are coming into our town and staying at the hotel and paying that 7%. So we want to be funded by the people that we're producing. We feel like that going forward, we're going to be cash flowing ourselves through this if we have the opportunity to have this funding from this committee. So that's feel like that's important. And as a person that's our family's had this business here for 66 years in this community. And we've always paid our taxes, and so it's something that I feel like it should be coming from other people, not our own. So we're going to ask for $500,000, and with that money, what we will do with it is only the inside and the museum build-out, the design, the lighting, the decor, the fixtures, the displays. None of this we're looking to put towards our actual building structure. We feel like that's ours, but what the draw for this tourism and what the draw for these hotel stays is the interior of that. And it can be done in two ways. It can be done on our budget, which is dwindling as we go, or it can be done with some help. And we just feel like that this is an opportunity sitting in front of us that personally, growing up in the city, I don't think we've seen. And so it can be done one of two ways. And that's the focus of why we're doing it. So,
Mike, can you give us a time frame of the as I understood, the truck is going out on tour for a while, and when will the actual construction of the museum start?
the truck left yesterday, and right now it's sitting in Sturgis, South Dakota. It will head to Butte, Montana for Evel Knievel Days at the end of the week, and then come back to Sturgis for the full week there, where there's over 500,000 people that will visit Sturgis here in the next couple of weeks. Then the potential for it is to go to Los Angeles, to Hollywood for a movie premiere. There's been 2 documentaries that have come out this year on Evel Knievel, and Johnny Knoxville movie is having a premiere at the end of August, and they've asked for the truck to be there. Beyond that, we're working with Mack Trucks, who actually flew in for the press conference. They've flown in twice in the last 2 weeks because they're so excited about the truck, and they've assisted with moving the trucks around the country, with providing 2 brand new tractor and trailers to haul them. So there's some national interest right there that was affirming too, that came from the companies like that. The rig will be out on the road for what we're looking at, and what Mack would like to do is tour this thing to huge events all through the next year. Big events like Daytona 500, Indianapolis 500, things like this, major truck shows. It's wide open right now where it's going to go, but the reason they're stepping up is because they want to promote it. The opportunity for us in this room is that we can go with them and promote the city and promote the museum this whole way to these large events, and invite them to come to the city and see the museum. We feel like most people are going to walk up to it, are going to have some interest in that. So the idea too is for the building to hopefully start in the next 30 to 60 days. Sooner would be better for me, but we're ready to go with it. We'd like to be enclosed by the end of the when the weather hits, so that we can be working inside, and then have the completion done mid-next year and be ready to open the museum.
And I have one other follow-up question on this whole idea, and it's exciting, and we commend you and congratulate you for the success of it. If you look at the entities that have been funded in the past, they've all been either nonprofit. We actually funded Topeka High School and a church. So would you establish a nonprofit sector or arm of the museum that would be interested in applying for the money? And I don't even know that we have any requirements on what we can fund and who we fund and all of that. So that may have to be discussed in the process itself. So, but is there an interest in establishing a nonprofit to receive funding?
We have explored that. I think the challenge for a nonprofit to be attached to a profit-driven corporation is one of the first questions they ask on the nonprofit questionnaire. I don't think there's a precedent for nonprofits being required to be a nonprofit. I know there's other places where this money's gone in the past to corporations that haven't been nonprofit. So I'm not certain we could meet the requirements for that. I think there is the potential that Latham could put together something with his collection, but ourselves, no, it would not be a nonprofit.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit, and maybe Brett could help? This is, to my knowledge, the first thing really where a national, like a real national advertising campaign for our community makes sense. Could you talk about the cost in buying national TV advertising or whatever sort of advertising we need to really market ourselves to the United States, and what the investment it's going to take to really announce to the world, hey, we have this thing and it's open, come see us?
No, I can't. I don't have any idea how much that costs.
Okay.
I just know it's a lot, and it's probably, we've just never been in that position. The way we're looking, the possibilities out there, and we have talked about this is an opportunity to advertise Topeka nationally, as you say. Don't know if TV is the proper way to do it. One of the things that we're going to do is run a tour, around the country and advertise ourselves nationally. When that's over, it will be interesting to see where that goes. My dream and hope is that we're filling hotel rooms so fast that we have to build more, and that we're seeing more money flowing into here, and utilizing it in ways that make sense to keep boosting those hotel stays and bringing them, right through this committee. So, can't answer exact numbers, but I do know that, there's certainly an opportunity to say, come to Topeka. It's not something we've had.
Well, and I appreciate that, and the numbers really aren't so significant, but the idea is that if we're going to do this,
Yeah.
we have one shot
Yes.
to do it right.
Yeah.
Because if we launch this thing and we don't launch it correctly, then it's going to flop. So we need to get
Yeah.
out there and we need to do it and do it right. And we've got Visit Topeka's got a great team, and you guys have got a great team to do this. So I commend you for all of the partnerships you're putting together. But I think we as a community need to get behind this project and say, you know what, this is a big deal for us as Topeka. Let's make it happen, and let's get it out there and make it big enough that it has maximum impact.
And to your point, that's why we're here, because we want to maximize it.
Yeah.
And we want it to be something that when people come through, it's not just looking at a lot of cool stuff. They have an actual experience, and an experience that when they leave, they tell other people, and they tell their friends, and they put it on Facebook and Twitter and say, gosh, you got to see this. It was an amazing experience. I'm not sure that we have the ability to do that without some help. We also want it to be dynamic and continually changing, so that they want to come back, and it's not a one-trip deal. It's something that they'll come back maybe yearly. So that's going to take some money too, to continue to keep it interesting.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
So with equal opportunity, is there anyone else here that has not presented in the last meeting, or two? I guess we had 2 meetings regarding the request for funding. I don't see any hands. Is there anyone that wants to present, additional information that they put forth at one of our meetings? Kurt?
Thank you. Kurt Young, Executive Director of the Topeka Lodging Association. I'll try and keep this brief, but it was our recommendation that kind of got us to this point at the May meeting to extend the 1%, albeit it's 5 years longer than what we had requested. We have no problem with that. I want to just give you a little bit of an update on the public plaza and where it stands at this point, and give you a little bit of insight into why we feel this is so important, and how the Lodging Association has played a role. You asked a question earlier, Councilman or Swartz, about the history of the existing 1% as well as the Sunflower Soccer, and you never really got an answer on the Sunflower Soccer. It was the Lodging Association, if you'll remember, several years ago that came to this body after many years of pleading that the transient guest tax money be used in a way that could be considered as an investment in the community. And we have now seen the Sunflower Soccer Complex renovation and rebuilding project come to fruition, and we're grateful for that. But as industry professionals in the travel and tourism industry, I don't feel there's a group of people that's any more qualified to stand back and look at particular projects and evaluate the potential for success in terms of travel and tourism than the lodging industry. Specifically with respect to the public plaza, I want to quote Roger Brooks from Roger Brooks International, and he's the gentleman that was in here 2 years ago, spent about 9 months, nearly a year here, doing the branding study and the branding recommendation. But Roger's quote in an email to me about 2 months ago, and this is a quote: "There is flat out nothing the city or downtown Topeka can do for less money that will have a stronger, faster, and better return on investment than building the public plaza." He went on to say, again, quote, "For cities in tough financial straits, a year-round programmed public plaza will bring people downtown on a consistent basis. When you do this, retailers will follow. Development of the plaza is a means to an end. It will build community pride. It will slow the leakage of locally earned money being spent elsewhere. It will increase property values and retail sales through an increased tax base. Plazas are an investment, not an expense, and it will increase tourism spending." So I think that as you walk through this process of determining where money goes, our message has been consistent for the last 8 or 10 years. Use this money in a manner that is going to be providing a return on the investment. And if you do that, the public plaza has got to rise to the top of any consideration. Just to update you a little bit as to where we are today in this process, we've identified multiple sites within Topeka to consider for the plaza. An architect is on board and has made a formal proposal to begin the process, just waiting for our go-ahead. The first step of this process is a site analysis. As I said, we've identified multiple sites. We need to figure out which site is the most beneficial in the overall scheme of what we're trying to accomplish. That site analysis they have identified is going to cost $19,000. I will be making a presentation later on, very soon, hopefully. We may have a private source of funding for that $19,000 to get that site analysis done. It's too early. I haven't made that presentation yet, but the indications I'm getting is that that's a possibility. The second step would be the actual, once the study is done, the actual site selection, the funding, procurement support, which the architect has agreed to do pro bono. So not pay for the land, but I mean all of the coordination that it takes to get that process accomplished. The third step is to actually do final design and construction documents at a cost of $218,000. That is the quote we have from the architect right now. So you can see that this project has taken on a life and is progressing more rapidly than anyone expected. The committee that's working on this has a goal of having the public plaza up and functioning within 3 years. That may sound a little bit aggressive, but it's realistic, especially in light of the momentum that we've gained at this point in the process. You can also see from this timetable and the numbers that I've given you that we'll be in a position very soon to require or to have access to funding. Assuming that we can get the $19,000 to do the site analysis, the first actual need for funding would be the land acquisition. I wish I could tell you today what that's going to be. I have aspirations of what I think it might be, but it's too early to tell on that as well. So the thing that I would encourage you is to continue to look at the wise investment. As I'm continue to be pleased and amazed at the change in attitude with respect to the use of transient guest tax dollars in the 10 years that I've been standing before this body talking about the use of transient guest tax money. So I'll answer any questions that you may have. If you have any, and I think that pretty well gives you an update of where we're at this point in time.
Any questions?
I'd like to ask, just what is a plaza? Is it a recreational area, or can you describe that?
Well, it's an area that becomes the focal point of the city, of a downtown area. And bear in mind that we don't look at the downtown area necessarily as Kansas Avenue from 6th to 10th Street. The downtown area is larger than that. And we want to, but that plaza becomes an entertainment collection point, a venue where people gather for concerts, for the food truck event that Visit Topeka did such a fantastic job at the zoo. Just things going on. The idea, as Roger Brooks said in his study, is that if you're not doing something at that location in the area of 250 days a year, then something's wrong. But it could actually, it would be kind of a sunken environment where you could flood it. It'd have ice rink capabilities with a Zamboni and have a downtown ice rink. The best example I can give you is when you have a minute in your spare time, look at Rapid City, South Dakota. Roger Brooks did one, made the same recommendation to Rapid City, and they built it. And there is a vacant, or was a vacant 3-story warehouse building across the street from what is now their public plaza that was only inhabited by pigeons when this project started. And that building has been renovated, and the per square foot lease cost of space in that building is triple anything else in Rapid City right now. So it's a huge success story. And the retail has just flooded that downtown area. Everybody wants to be around the public plaza. So it's been a huge asset to them in terms of return on investment. But take a minute, read a little bit. I'm sure you can get on the internet and see what they've done with their public plaza.
Kurt, if you have any other examples that would be helpful to see what happens at public plazas. I know farmers markets. I've been to a lot of
Absolutely.
cities that have public plazas, and they have special events. So if
I
you can think of any other.
I think Lexington, Kentucky
Mhm.
has one.
Yes, they do.
But Roger Brooks has been very successful around the country, around the world actually, because they do go outside of the continental United States. They do work in Canada as well. And not that every city, he doesn't make a recommendation for a public plaza in every city, but there have been other locations where they've been very successful.
I know there's other capitals that have a plaza connected to the capital. I don't know if they're state-funded, any of the public plaza. I do remember that when I served in the legislature, we had a plaza proposal that I think has gone by the wayside. When Mayor Bunton was in the legislature, I think he was also involved with that. Is the plaza, the locations that you have, are any of them near the Capitol that you're looking at?
Yes, in fact, one of the criteria, at least kind of a personal criteria and a criteria, I know Vince and I have talked about it before, is that at a minimum, a view of the Capitol building from the plaza would be very important to us.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to hedge on telling you where the locations are, and I think you understand why.
Understand totally. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
It seems that this would be kind of a local attraction. How do you plan to fill overnight stays with that park?
When we look in the lodging industry, when we look at a way to generate hotel room night stays, you're really looking at it from two different avenues. One is new business, obviously getting new people into town that will stay in your hotels, that'll come to your city, that wouldn't otherwise come. That plaza, in that light, that public plaza becomes one more piece of ammunition in Brett's arsenal to use to sell conventions here in Topeka, conventions and meetings, what have you. Because then we have some place for those people to go in the evening when there's an event at the public plaza. We lose a lot of business today, not because of our convention facilities, but because we are lacking in things to do in the evening in terms of entertainment and venues to go to when they're not sitting in a meeting room someplace. So that's one avenue. The second avenue is getting people to stay longer. Our goal in the hotel business has always been, if you get them for one night, get a second night out of them, okay? Try to figure out a way to get 2 nights out of 1 or 3 nights out of 2. So this just becomes one more tool, along with everything else that we have. You know, you're considering a lot of bona fide projects as you look at your list of people requesting money. All of them together are all good investments. Some are better than others, and I think that's what you're going to have to weigh through. But that's the two avenues, Mr. Cohn, that we really look at. We're trying to generate new business, people that have never been to Topeka and stayed in a hotel here, as well as extending those existing stays. And the plaza gives us the means to do that. Not by itself, probably more so by itself than any other thing we could do. Roger Brooks says that. There is flat out nothing that the city or downtown can do for less money that will have a stronger, faster, and better return on investment. And I can't say it any better than that. The big thing here is that if we can achieve this and secure the funding, then my goal is to do this with no impact on the local taxpayer. If this can all be done with transient guest tax dollars, then we have no impact on the local taxpayer, but we have a venue at the end of the day that, as Mr. Jensen was saying earlier, that 10 years from now, those people are sitting here in this room, and hopefully I won't be one of them, have an abundance of transient guest tax dollars to work with.
Kurt, you want to tell the new members on the committee how many hotels and motels are in the lodging association?
There's about, I think we're 17, I want to say around 17 member properties out of about 30 properties in the city. We continue to do things to prove to the non-member communities properties that they're losing out by not, as you know, membership's always an issue, no matter whether it's what the topic is. So,
Okay.
but we've developed a strong history of participation in the community with some of the things that we're doing. I hearken back to 8 or 9, 10 years ago when I was out trying to raise money from hotels to keep the solo nationals and the national runoffs here in Topeka for the SCCA. Was not successful. It was not, I will tell you, it was not for a lack of trying on the part of the lodging community, because the lodging community in Topeka put up $15,000 in cash at the time to subsidize that event. So we're very concerned and want to continue to play an active role in promoting those things here in Topeka that will generate travel and tourism.
Okay. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that wants to, is it Grant?
Good morning. I'm Grant Glenn. I'm a lawyer in town, but I'm here today. I am a board member of Constitution Hall, but I'm also a board member of Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. That's a heritage area supported by the National Park Service, consisting of about 42 counties in eastern Kansas and western Missouri. The theme of that originally was Bleeding Kansas, and that never was going to pass the Congress, and it broadened its theme to one of freedom and telling multiple stories. And those stories are Bleeding Kansas and what happened in Missouri that was, you know, there were consequences on both sides. And then the themes grew, and the Brown versus Board of Education was the epitome of the struggle of freedom. And the Great Overland Station represents the westward movement of the Oregon trails and others, and then the trains that got people to places like Nicodemus and others to settle. And the story of freedom, this is the heartland of the story of freedom. And this fund that you're talking about, we devote 5% already to getting beds filled every day. And there was a broader view looking at what else do we have in Topeka. And Topeka has a wonderful historic story to tell when it comes to freedom. And it's integrated with other communities like Lecompton and Lawrence and in counties and cities in Missouri, because this is where it happened. And in 1855, there was the dispersal of the Free State Legislature by an act of President Pierce. And you see no Pierce Street in Topeka. Clay Street replaces Pierce, and that is the reason why, going back to that event. Across the street, you see the post office building where the Brown v. Board trial was held. These are monumental. That court case is the most known court case in the world. and it's monumental, and it happened here. It is our heritage, and heritage tourism will drive people. My involvement in tourism goes back to being married to someone who was editor of Kansas Magazine for over 20 years. She lived and breathed promotion of this state in this area. I understand that there are lots of demands for those dollars. And we've heard about some worthy projects today. They're truly worthy. But there are other sources for funds for those kinds. There's TIF money, there's Go Topeka money, there's neighborhood revitalization money. But when it comes to restoring historic properties that are a long-term investment for the future of this community and the historic tourism, and they really need a cluster of these to promote themselves. The Ritchie House and the Brown, get people off the road and make a day and see these different sites that all tie into the great story of freedom. When we see those things, please don't get caught up in what is sparkly today. Please remember that for the last 15 years, this fund has gone to restore something that we saw as a long-term best interest, which is the Great Overland Station and the park area that we'll be allowed to develop when the levees are built. And that foresight applies equally to these other heritage sites that we have here and this is the only source of funds. If there was a commitment by this city for a part of a property tax to invest in historic buildings in our heritage, then that would be fine. But this is where the policy is. And so when all of the fireworks are going off on these wonderful things that can be done, there are other ways that those can be done. They will be done. And the only way that historic tourism is getting revitalized is slowly with this fund, and I urge you to please preserve it. Thank you.
Grant, we have a couple questions
Okay,
for
sure.
you. Councilman Jensen.
And forgive me, this may sound kind of rash. So if this is so important, how come we haven't been able to fund it with donations from the private sector?
Well, Constitution Hall, I assume you're in particular. I mean,
Well, that and really broader in the historic tourism. I've gotten lots of emails from folks that say it's very important, but yet we've not been able to fund it with donations, and I simply don't know. I believe in Constitution Hall. I think it's an important jewel in our community. I'm just wondering why there isn't other funding mechanisms if these items are so crucial to our history and our future.
you'll have to weigh personally whether once you destroy a building, it's gone.
Sure,
absolutely. You can't talk about it. That building in particular was literally, the destruction had started on it when the state made an appropriation to acquire it with the stipulation that they would not fund it beyond the acquisition at any point. And so there was not a community-based organization already in place that was in place to do this. There was a fair amount of controversy over whether this was Constitution Hall or another building. I think that when it got listed on the National Register for its national importance, there was no doubt at that point. So it has been a constant struggle to keep the building intact with what funds could be, so it didn't diminish further. I think we're getting close with some of the work that is on slate to do now with the construction of the stairway on the outside and basically the raising of the second floor so that it opens it up to show that it's a room that would hold 300 people. Suddenly I think we're going to have people understand that this is really a worthy of their time and their money. It isn't in a vacuum, by the way. I don't want to speak for somebody else, but as there was a front page article on the fact that the Downtown Rotary believes that this is an important place, and for its 100th anniversary, its members have funded over $30,000 to help build a pocket park that will be adjacent to that, the only green space on Kansas Avenue. Why? We can always do something else. But this is the most reasonable opportunity to go forward today. And it isn't the only worthy historical property.
Sure.
And it is, it is a constant battle between people who want to fill beds today versus others that want to see a long-term benefit. And really, Karen Hiller said publicly that really our tagline needs to be something about freedom, because Topeka is so intimately involved in the freedom process. The problem is, us middle-aged white guys aren't real proud of that Brown case that showed that we were racial in Topeka at one time, and it's been a hard sell, but we've come around, and it is a wonderful, wonderful story. And Constitution Hall story is just part of the wonderful freedom story.
So there isn't going to be enough money, I'm guessing, to complete the restoration. And you've mentioned several times that this is the only funding source to do that. There isn't going to be enough to get it done. What are you going to do? I mean, if we can't give you all the money you need to finish the project, are you going to try and get other funding at that point then, or?
Well, there will be a larger community board that will have to come into being and raise a commitment of $200,000 additional money. And if the city makes a commitment of this magnitude, I'm sure it'll be much easier to get the remainder to finish it. It is so, without a facade, it is hard to see what it could possibly be.
Sure.
And it's been hard for people with vision. It's been a struggle, but we're really on the cusp of making this. And really, the plan for that would be on the first floor, making tourist-friendly businesses, and put that floor on the tax rolls. I mean, you want to make a facility that is viable, not just a museum to look at, but that can pay its own way.
One other question I have for you. All historic structures struggle with, once people have come to see them, unless they change or have rolling content. You've already seen that, and a lot of people don't go back again. Do you guys have a plan for that, so that you keep people coming back again and again?
Well, we're a long ways from programming. I mean, if we don't have the money, we don't have all the programming. We do have some basic signage to help explain the story, and it would be visioned that the first floor will remain with dirt floors where the Underground Railroad was. Second floor, more of a reception space with exhibits, and those exhibits can change, and you can have cooperative deals with other museums, the Kansas Historical Society. Everybody would want it to be successful.
Sure,
but
absolutely.
it needs to be preserved first. And then it is part of the coalition of these local sites that are part of the Freedom Sites. They've been working together. There's an alliance. And it's one of the few communities outside of Freedom's Frontier where the local people understand that they have to tell the story together and mutually. We're very close to a cell phone wayside tour. The cell phone tour exists, but the waysides are not in place yet. That's been paid for by the National Park Service that show the freedom stories. I'm sure is here, and she could talk a little bit about the status of that, but that's very exciting. I think, again, part of what the story is. It's a part, but if you don't have multiple sites, it's not likely that you're going to get the stops.
Excellent. And you answered my follow-up question, too, so thank you.
So, Grant, with the understanding that we have some interest in the Oregon Trail coming, and also the fact that maybe in the future the state will be in a better position to be able to help with any funding. I've got, and I've carried this around for a long time, the first Missouri State Capitol State Historic Site. And if you look at it, it's the Missouri Department of Natural Resources that has it as a park. So is that a possibility that we will begin to work with the state in looking at, restoring the historic site in addition to working with the city?
The state is under such budget clamor, and really, this is not new. I mean, for the last 10 years, they've been trying to push money more towards education and away from preserving buildings. I don't think the administration wants any more buildings or any more commitments on their financial resources. I think it would be naive to expect that to happen. I've been to that Missouri site several times in Charleston. It's a wonderful site. It was built about 20 years before our own Constitution Hall, and its restoration is very similar. You go into the assembly hall there and see the benches and the spittoons, and you get a real feel for the way life was. It was a hard life when they gathered. This Constitution Hall was not just where the Constitution and the legislature met. It was the city town hall for a number of years. That large meeting hall upstairs was the home of 5 different churches before they were able to build their own church. There's just a wonderful history, and as I say, it's also on the Underground Railroad. The Oregon Trail passed in front of Constitution Hall. And it was the scene of commerce. It's the oldest commercial building in Topeka. But again, the emphasis here needs to be on this fund needs to do historical work that's badly needed.
One other quick question. Is there any effort to work with Union Pacific to put the Underground Railroad back in?
That's a good
That's your
question.
comic relief for the day? Thank you very much.
Okay, I see a hand back there in the back row.
I'm Sherida Williams. I'm the new superintendent at Brown versus Board of Education National Historic Site. So thank you
Welcome.
for letting me speak here. I wanted to follow up in support of Constitution Hall. Part of our legislation, Congress directed us, of course, to help preserve the history of the case itself. But secondary to that, they also directed us to help preserve civil rights history in Topeka. So we have a very clear understanding and a commitment to helping the local sites like Constitutional Hall interpret that history, because it so closely speaks to why the Brown case came out of Topeka in this part of Kansas. Like Glenn talked about, the Freedom's Frontier area, which is another National Park Service effort. And I have to say that Freedom's Frontier is recognized as one of our most viable and vibrant national heritage areas at this point in time. They just have a very good reputation nationally. We feel like we've already been making an investment, like Grant mentioned, in helping with the interpretive signage and waysides there at the park. We feel like Topeka is really specially positioned with historic sites like the Ritchie House, the Federal Courthouse, Brown, and the Constitution Hall to create this really condensed area of heritage tourism. About 10 to 15 years ago, the National Trust for Historic Preservation did a study on tourism, and they found that people that travel for heritage sites or cultural sites invest more than people that travel for just entertainment type venues. And I'm sorry I don't have the exact number. My computer crashed and I had a copy of that study, but I can't get to it right now. So we feel like it's really important to go ahead and preserve that to help us as people are pulled off the interstate for the National Historic Site to extend a visit here in town. I think that'd be very useful. You may not be aware of, but the National Park Service's 100th anniversary is August 26th of 2016, and the National Park Foundation has already contracted with and is working with Gray Advertising out of New York City to do, and they've already started a major promotional campaign for national parks. They've already started a social media arm of the campaign called Find Your Park with the hashtag symbol, and it's designed to be broad enough that any local, state, and all the national parks can be hooked into that advertising campaign. And then they're specifically with the campaign trying to generate a focus on the understanding that the National Park Service is not only the big national parks like Yosemite and Yellowstone, but also this complex system of historic sites that are right in your backyard. And Topeka is considered one of our urban centers that has the potential to basically address about 1.5 million people in the Kansas City, Wichita, and Topeka area. So, I think that there's a lot of potential for us to build off of that, so the timing is really good to fit in with that campaign. Additionally, Grant mentioned how critical that Brown case is in the history of our nation, and right now all the civil rights legislations are 60 years old or getting there. So there's a lot of attention on civil rights history. In addition to that, the number of times that the Brown v. Board case comes up in social media or in news articles is just incredible, because it relates so strongly to a lot of issues that are going on in today's history. So you have the opportunity to feed off of that interest that is starting to focus and coalesce around civil rights history and build this really rich center of history here in downtown Topeka, which I think really will help extend. The Park Service symbol with the brown information signs, we do a really good job at pulling people off the interstate, because people actually plan their vacations around national parks. So that's the number one advantage that you have in being hooked to that national history. But I think that this is an excellent opportunity to go ahead and leverage off of what you already have in place here and really make this a very deep and rich experience for people that come in, and thereby, the potential for extending overnight stays, I think, is really enhanced. So.
I know I've traveled around the country a little bit, and in New Orleans, the Park Service actually runs a historic site.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Park Service ever interested in expanding on that and helping with Constitution Hall?
It's a really political process. We don't advocate to Congress to do that. We are not allowed to advocate. The process starts at the local level with people expressing interest to their congressional delegation. Congress will then tell the Park Service if they see enough local support for that to happen. They will direct us to do a study to say whether it's suitable for inclusion in the Park Service and whether it's feasible. They will look at how much local support, whether the local community is behind the effort, whether there's been already investments made in it, et cetera. There's a lot of factors that they look at. The problem is that a lot of times now we are getting national parks created or additions made to the system, without funding. And so it just continually erodes our budget. And we've got quite a maintenance backlog of what we already own. We just, you can imagine that we manage an incredible number of facilities across the United States, both historic facilities and facilities to serve visitors. And right now the funding is stretched.
Okay.
And this is a good funding year.
Okay.
So it just probably unlikely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Good morning. Jeff Carson on behalf of the Jayhawk Theater. I emailed the committee last night a short list of some progress we've been making at the Jayhawk Theater, and I just wanted to give everybody an update. As I outlined to you, I'm the co-owner of Gizmo Pictures. We bought the 1888 Thatcher building, which is on the National Register, and we restored that building. And we use that for our headquarters, and of course Julie's is in that building as well. I serve on the board of DTI, and I've served on the boards of the Shawnee County Historical Society, Housing and Credit Counseling, and I'm also on the Landmarks Commission. So I think it's pretty clear I've been working very hard to preserve Topeka and all the historic grand old buildings that we have here, and I do put my money where my mouth is. So. And you know, during the past 5 years, I've been paying really close attention to the trajectory of downtown, and over, we all have been hearing how critical that the Jayhawks restoration is to the success of the downtown dynamic core. When I joined the board in 2010, I was eager to help build the credibility of the organization, and I think the organization deserves the confidence of the community from top to bottom. We've worked very hard for 20 years to get things moving, but it hasn't really progressed very much up until recently when 4 years ago we were awarded a historic tax grant for some air conditioning and electrical work and a State Heritage Trust Fund grant for the roof to help preserve the theater. And now our board has really become a stronger board in the last several years, and I really think we've gotten some real great traction. But it is still an $8 million project with a bunch of moving parts, historic tax credits, and other sources of funding to get this done. When I was elected the board president in February, we've made since then, we've made some very, very amazing progress, and I just wanted to outline for the committee what we've accomplished since February. We were awarded a $105,000 transient guest tax grant for marketing and dollars to help build a marquee. And the creation of this historic marquee, which will hang on the Jayhawk Tower on 7th Street, will give us a real credible marketing and street presence. We have temporarily restored the Candy Nook concession stand so we can actually use it and make popcorn and sell T-shirts and that sort of thing during events. We've repaired old rotted flooring so we can use the stage door to bring equipment and other large things in and out of the theater. We are replacing an old exit door and adjacent fire escape so that we can add more safety to the theater and have larger and better events. We've replaced our insurance policies. We've saved $1,400 in insurance premiums. We've resurrected our membership list, and we've increased our Facebook likes by over 300. We're currently temporarily restoring and renovating the old upstage gallery space on Jackson Street into a modern event gallery meeting space. We're working out our decor and AV system plans that will help us have better and more credible presentations in the gallery. And so far this year, we've raised over $22,000 in cash and grants for events, programming, marketing, and board development. And finally, we've built a really great large support base in Topeka. We've got the support of, Visit Topeka, of course, and Heartland Visioning, and a lot of local people who love that theater, who have renewed interest in the restoration of it and have fond memories of it from the days when it actually operated. It's going to be the hub for entertainment in downtown Topeka, and we can really change the entertainment dynamic for the entire state. It'll take a lot of hard work and planning and money, and your vote of confidence will change the conversation about our future. So I just wanted to say thank you for considering helping to fund our restoration process. Your support is going to send a really great message to the donor base and the rest of the community.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay. Betty?
I'm Betty Allen, President and COO at the Great Overland Station, and I have a lot to say, but I'm going to try hard to keep it short and sweet. There's been a lot talked about here, and it's all very, very exciting. And the first part of this I want to talk about is I had requested some funding to be provided to the Great Overland Station and that's primarily for ongoing maintenance and upkeep. And my story was, you build something that's beautiful and it's gorgeous, but then you forget to take into consideration it gets older and it wears out and has to be replaced. What I did was I started thinking about, I made the request, and I'm thinking, okay, what is it the money's going to be used for? And I went back to 2007 through 2014 and took what we had spent on maintenance and repairs for the station. It was over $250,000. So that is not any big maintenance items. That's your basic maintenance of the grounds, the Veterans Memorial. It costs about $40,000 a year to maintain the Veterans Memorial with all of the lights and everything like that. The high priorities that we have that are instant type of repairs that we would be needing going forward would be the lighting in the station. That's been happening quite frequently where the sockets are beginning to wear out and we have to replace all of the sockets. And when we're doing that, we're trying to make it to where we can put LED lights in, which saves money, saves cost, and they last a lot longer. So that is something that we are experiencing throughout the whole station. We have started to do some repairs because we cannot be in the dark. But it is an ongoing situation that will always be there, but trying to maintain it and get it fixed as quickly as we can would be great. The biggest items that we have going forward is the air conditioning and the heating in the station. Those of you that are familiar with big, large buildings, you've got these big chillers and these handlers and that are huge and humongous in these big buildings. And ongoing, down in the future within the next 5 years, the chiller that we have in place is beginning to deteriorate. They are estimating it to cost about $100,000 to replace it. And they have started putting costs together for me before this all came up. So they are trying to work towards it so we don't have a crisis. If the chiller goes down, we have no air. So I don't want to be sitting here in 3 years and it goes down. We talked about it 3 years ago, but we haven't done anything about it. So, you know, having the money to accrue and to accommodate the chiller expenses. We have a handler. There's 5 handlers up in the attic that maintain the controls for the heating and the cooling. We had one that has been babied for quite a while. It's leaked through the ceiling. So we've got some ceiling repairs that we're going to have to do, but I do not want that to happen in the rest of the station because you have, and I baby the main waiting room because of the painted ceilings and everything like that. So trying to keep up on all the maintenance is a real challenge. But to have the funds available for ongoing maintenance and repair is going to be critical because there's going to be other things that are going to be happening, and you know the concretes are going to start splitting, and we have to keep that maintained and everything like that. So that is just an update. I wanted to know where I was dollar-wise and what I'm looking at for maintenance and repairs. And the other thing, too, is I'm just encouraged by all the conversations that we've had today. You know, not everybody likes art, not everybody likes theater, not everybody likes soccer, not everybody likes history. But Topeka has so many of those things, and we're not that huge of a city. And so being able to have the variety, because people come in for the Freedom Frontier, but you want other people coming in also and not driving by because there's nothing for them. And I think we have some great opportunities with the park, the history, the Brown versus Board and their connection and everything. It was just pretty exciting. And that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? It's great that we've had to move to the Holiday Building because we've outgrown the other conference room over at City Hall. So it's nice to have a good attendance.
I'll be very brief, no notes, so I'll have to be. I'm Stan Martindale. I was an eager contributor to the Rotary Pocket Park, and I believe there are about 80 other contributors, and not all of which were Rotarians, by the way. And in relatively short order, we raised about $30,000. So I think it speaks to the issue, is there going to be private sector support for Constitution Hall I think the answer is yes. I think having a fully restored Constitution Hall downtown with revitalized downtown is going to be a great combination, so I would encourage you to support it. Thanks.
Anyone else? We've got one more hand back there.
Don't forget Beth.
Oh, Beth, yeah, okay.
Hello, everyone. I also have no notes, so I'm just winging it, so bear with me. I'm not here to ask for any money.
You want to state your name first?
Sure. My name is Marty Risen. I host a little group online called the Topeka History Geeks, and it is just over 10,700 members. And you imagine in a group like that, people talk about history quite a bit. And there's a lot of debate on what's important and what's not. And what I hear more than anything else is, why didn't we do something before it was too late? And, you know, you have these opportunities. And my strongest feelings today is the folks at Constitution Hall. That is an important story to our history. It is the making of our history. And what astonishes me over and over again is how many people in this town don't even know about it. And I think with proper support, that could be the making of our city. We have so many great things here. We have so many great attractions here. And to bring people in for one thing, sure, maybe they won't come back again for that one thing, but let's get them here and see what else is going on. Heritage tourism is huge. It's growing. People are fascinated with the Civil War. And if you research the Civil War, we had a big part to do with it, even though not a lot was fought here. You can't just discount it because it's not established. It should be, and it's a shame that it's not. You wonder if people are going to come here. In this group, I have this just huge resource to hear what people have to say about history and tourism. And I don't have to participate. I can just watch. And I hear people all the time, I didn't know that was there. I have to come see that. People will get in their cars and go drive from cities, towns, and come here just to drive by and see what we're talking about. People in town, people as far away as New York, people who live in Europe who lived here for a while or grew up here. They are very invested in our history, and they want to know more, and they want to see it preserved. And they definitely come back to see it. So if you have any questions for me.
Questions? Okay. I was with one of your members and went up to the top of Burnett's Mound.
Wonderful.
And we also then tried to find Chief Burnett's grave and found it through somebody living, which is actually, and I don't know if this is true, the legend is that the grave was moved in 65 and the tornado happened in 66. And they said as long as the chief was protecting the mound, we were protecting the city. But I think it's just a legend at this point. But you do have a huge membership. So, and tell us again the name of that
It is
group.
the Topeka History Geeks,
Okay.
and it's just a simple Facebook search. Eventually, we're going to have more of a presence online, website, the whole should-do, but it takes time.
Okay. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Beth.
So I just wanted to come up and give a brief update, since I did mention the Oregon Trail connection with the National Park Service and their Heritage Trails program, that the city has indeed now been in contact with the people at the Heritage Trails program, and they are, I don't believe they have a date set yet. Bill Fyander may know, but we have a date approximately next spring or early summer for them to come to Topeka and work with the county and the city and other stakeholders in that area on that North Side Riverfront Park, which will have an Oregon Trail theme. And that will be a pro bono thing that they do, along with bringing all their experience and mental resources with other park sites and other trail sites, to create an experience here in Topeka about the Oregon Trail that really will be a draw. And so I think really I'm just going to echo words that many speakers have said, but heritage tourism is important and it brings people to the community. And we have the Great Overland Station as a Freedom's Frontier site, the Constitution Hall, and certainly Brown v. Board. So we have many opportunities here to build on this Freedom's Frontier theme, and historic sites right in our downtown area that really, I think, will be a draw, not only nationally, but internationally. So, and I think, Kurt, again, I love that theory, but once you get people into Topeka, we will have enough things to do that they're going to want to stay for a long weekend, maybe a whole week. Maybe we can get them here for a whole week, and it's their destination vacation. So thank you all. You have a hard job here, but it's pretty exciting, everything that's going on. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Beth. And it is exciting. We have several different entities that have requested funding, and staff have put them down on a document for us. There's a couple here that we haven't really heard from, but that have come and talked about requests for funding. But what I think we ought to move to now, right now, is to determine whether or not we're going to have a formalized process to submit requests for funding. And I think probably the staff could come up with a form that would be considered. The history, I don't know how, it sounds like what we had in the past when there was dedicated funding to either the soccer or the Overland Station, that there really wasn't an application process. You came to the council committee and then that was taken to the full council. So Kurt, you want to interject on that?
This is very, if this is the route you go, this is very reminiscent of the process that was in place 6-7 years ago when we had what was called the Tourism Development Fund Board, the TDFB, and they had a form at that time. That program was administered by a separate group, a board of about 15 people, which was rather cumbersome. But there was a form at that time that entities had to fill out to show their case, or build their case, and then it was considered by the board. And
do you have a copy of that form?
I
or
could
do you
probably find it
okay.
With a little assistance.
Okay.
But do you have it?
Okay.
Okay.
And why was that all dissolved? I mean, if it was, did the fund go away, or what happened?
Well, the reason it went away is that the city council took it back.
Okay.
It is my
So
recollection.
the history was there was funding out there from the city that was in a fund that was kind of overseen by this advisory group.
Basically, what was, as I remember, and there may be people in the room that can jog my memory a little bit, what was not given to Visit Topeka, there was any excess was put in this fund, and then a board, an independent board made up of different representatives, considered the applications for funding. I just know if you're gonna, there's no sense reinventing the wheel. If you're gonna go back to that kind of a process, there's probably already a form in place.
Okay.
But
well, and then that begs the question as to if we've got the 1% for 12 years, is this going to be a process every year, or are we putting a process in place for the 12 years for the funding? How much funding are we talking about, Brandon or Nikki?
We talked about that a little bit. Really, I think that would be part of it, would have to come out of your recommendation.
Okay.
For example, for the 1% that is being extended, that one was mandated in a resolution in 2002 that said X amount, it said 200,000 total is going to the Great Overland Station, and the remainder goes to the Historic Preservation Fund. And then that Preservation Fund had a process every year that designated what grants would go out. So the only way that council could change what was set out in that original resolution was to amend the resolution. So that's one option is to line out exactly how it's going to be spent for the next 12 years. I think there are pros and cons. I mean, the pros is then that everyone knows what they're planning on. So those organizations know what funding stream they'll be getting for the next period of time. Or alternatively, you could do like we do to the 5% TGT, and that is that really every year this committee has a new budget before them and decides what it will be spent on. So you could do, it's really whatever this group wants to do, correct, Mary? Whatever the resolution lines out, it can be either.
I would advocate on some of these where it's appropriate that we allocate the money and then bond it so these projects get started. Giving somebody a tiny bit of money over 12 years is not going to get anything done other than maintaining the status quo. And some of these projects are very important to the future of our community, especially now while we're in this sort of renaissance, if you will. And if we do this strategically, that could be a springboard for them to get them done and could just help continue elevating our community. So I would like to see us keep that in mind where it's appropriate and makes good financial sense.
Jeff, do you have any comments on
Is
how?
this so if we go take it out 12 years, it'd be 2028, is that right? So what we would do is just add up the total expected here, and that's the grand total that we're talking about, is that right? Okay.
So what you've got in front of you, and this is a copy for those of you that were at the meeting on June, or the May 20th, and I think the June 2nd meeting, you saw a projection of funds. There's a few pots of money. One would be, and there's really two decisions to be made. One is the sunflower soccer excess. So of that 1% set aside for that project, we're projecting that after we make the principal and interest payments that there will be some excess. So that's what you see on the left column. And then the 1% extension is estimated after the admin fee to be about $375,000 per year. And then we've added a little projection to that. So if you add all of those up, then by the year 2032, there'd be 7.9 million estimated.
So what would we have to, I mean, we would bond the request or determine what was needed for the request and then bond that, and then it would actually, this 7.9 million would come in and pay those bonds off, Brandon?
That would be mine.
Councilmember
This
Short,
way,
I
too.
mean, historically,
Sorry.
the TGT funds have been cash flowed, and so there's just straight cash for the projects. I think the sunflower soccer is one example of where bonds have been utilized, and we'll be starting that process in August.
Okay. So this committee needs to decide then if we are looking out to 2032, if we do any bonding, so that the entities that are requesting the money could go ahead with the progress they need.
That's correct.
Okay. Does that make sense, Jeff? Okay.
Well, and I like so if we do an application process, then each entity that's interested in receiving a chunk of change, if they could indicate whether or not, what would you need to move your project forward to actually make some effort, and then would it make sense to bond it, and then possibly explain why. So,
Which would be an example of, we've already seen the dedicated streaming, or the dedicated funding going to soccer and the Overland Station, and it has worked.
mhm.
So this would be in essence, broadening that to other entities.
And Brett, you had some comments, if you don't mind.
A couple thoughts about everything that everybody's talked about, and specifically about what you're referring to right now. I think that the past, where it was voted on a yearly basis, it was difficult for some organizations to manage because they weren't always guaranteed that they would have money for the next year. So that money tended to be used more for operational cost than it was for a big plan that was going to actually improve the overall idea of what they were trying to accomplish. So from that standpoint, I would like to see whoever you decide to allocate money to, for that to be bonded out so they could have that full amount and they could get to work on it right away. of all the money that is up for grabs, so to speak, I would also like to see some of that money set aside and not allocated right at this point. I'll make some other comments about what everybody talked about to give you an explanation why. Going back to Mike and the Evil Knievel Museum, when Mike reached out to myself to discuss the museum, and we talked about all the possibilities, and he showed me what he had and what we could do in terms of the truck going on a nationwide tour. It was Visit Topeka that gave him the recommendation that he asked for today. He was not willing and ready to necessarily ask for that much money, but once we discussed the need for this to be as highest quality as it possibly can to make sure that the museum is as good as everybody would hope it would be when they would come to an Evil Knievel museum. I've been to a lot of other museums that are not up to par with what you would expect when you went in, and we don't want that to happen. Mike, from the time I've got to know him, he's a very honest guy. He's one of the more honest people I've met, and you can really take what he says at face value. And when he says that he is concerned about being a good steward to the community with this project, I believe him wholeheartedly. He is as concerned about making sure that what his project is brings business back to the community and has overnight stays. And I trust that he will work with Visit Topeka and whoever else he needs to work with 100% to make sure that it's marketed appropriately and make sure that he is doing the little things he can do to stretch that short visit at the museum into a longer day to make it capable of having someone stay the night. Because that's what we're really looking at. We're looking at all these different places around Topeka and how can we piece them together to stretch the day out long enough where it's time to eat dinner and now it's time to stay the night. To me, the Evil Knievel Museum is a game changer for tourism in Topeka because it gives us some national and international marketability to be able to market Topeka for the Evil Knievel Museum. But at the same time, the word Topeka is going to get out there and people are going to hear about us. But more importantly, I think that it lends credibility to the tourism aspects of Topeka and that there are things going on in Topeka that are truly worthy of national attention that are going to help draw other events and organizations to Topeka. Ever since I started working on it with Mike, my staff has been working on that niche market of daredevil, motorcycle, Harley type people and what events are out there. And what we're learning is that there are people that are finding out about this and they want to bring their events to Topeka. A good example of that is the Kansas Hog Rally, the Harley Owners Group that just took place here about 2 months ago. That event goes around the state because it's a state event and they try to go to 6 or 7 different communities. So a couple months ago, when I was talking with HR Cook about when do you think we will bid on it next, he said it probably won't be back for about 6 or 7 years. Since everything's came out about the Evil Knievel Museum, the Harley Owners Group wants to come back next year and they want to make it a bigger event. There are endless possibilities with Heartland Park that we could do out there for motorcycle racing and different conventions that all follow this same suit. In addition to that, there are some other projects that are in the very beginning stages, not as far along as the Evil Museum, but in the very beginning stages that is very complementary to what this museum could be. And one of them in its own right could possibly be as big as what the Evil Knievel Museum is. Will that get off the ground? I don't know, and I don't know if Mike knows, but there are people that are looking at Topeka for their tourism aspects for the sole reason of Evil Knievel Museum being here. So, when it comes to the events Mike talked about, the truck's going to be going around the country, and we are going to try to send some of our staff to certain places as well to help promote Topeka and promote other events that we have going on as well as the museum while we're there. You asked about how one would go about advertising on a national level. And I don't think that Visit Topeka as an organization fully understands how to either, but we partner with Jones Hewitt Partners here in Topeka for a lot of our advertising, as well as Mike, and that is what they do. And so there's no doubt in my mind that they would be able to help us out with that. I know we've already talked about some ideas, and it could be as simple as buying a one-page ad in the Indianapolis 500 program guide or the Daytona 500 program guide. Working with Mack Truck on when they're doing a commercial is a possibility for them to give us a little blurb in that commercial as well. Advertising with Harley and utilizing what we already have and who is already backing this project to advertise from a national level. And that is something that Topeka hasn't done before. So it's very exciting to us of all those possibilities. As far as the question of being a nonprofit, I understand why the question is asked, because it is a for-profit business that is essentially asking for some money. But as Mike and the Evel Knievel Museum benefit from this museum, the community is as well. And that is what's most important from Visit Topeka's standpoint, where our sole purpose is to market events and bring people to Topeka. So I would urge you not to be concerned with the thought of Historic Harley-Davidson being a for-profit business and Mike making some money off this museum, because in my opinion that's his right to do so. But if Visit Topeka can help him market it, that is going to bring more people in. It's not only going to benefit him, it's going to benefit everybody that's in the community. It's going to benefit all the other events and all the other venues, including all the other historical properties that spoke today as well. Because when they come here to see a bit of nostalgia for Evel Knievel, they might be more likely to go attend some of the other events and go to some of the other places to check it out too. More than likely, they're not going to drive from out of town and just go to Evel Knievel Museum and leave. So they'll stick around in town. As far as the public plaza, to answer some questions, the hotels, you know, I go to a lot of conferences. When I was working in hotels, I went to a lot of conferences, and I would assume that a lot of everybody in this room has to attend conferences and whatever their trade is. The reason why conferences mostly end up in Miami and Las Vegas and Chicago is because it is a fun city with a lot to do. The people that are putting on conferences are looking for a city and that is going to put its best foot forward to make sure that not only is the educational aspect of the conference going to be top notch, but also there's going to be something for them to do. So I understand that we are not any of those cities, but when we're talking about regional and state organizations that are looking for their conferences, they're looking for a way to get their conference from 200 attendees to 250 attendees. And a lot of times that is coming on the tails of looking at having a party, an opening night kickoff party, having a party at the end, having things to do so that people know that if I'm going to come to Topeka or if I'm going to go to Salina, that it's not just 8 to 5 sitting in meetings. There's going to be something for me to do beforehand or after. For instance, I just got back from Austin last week for a national tourism conference. The first night before the conference even opened, they had a concert at Austin City Limits. Again, I understand that Topeka is not Austin when it comes to the tourism impact that Topeka has, but same rules still apply, that if we can put on a good show and we have a venue that we can congregate to and have everybody at, then it's going to be more likely that that person that's on the fringe of attending the conference might decide to come check it out because, well, there's a concert beforehand. I can go check out some of the museums in the evening when I'm done. So that's what we're looking for. We're trying to figure out what it takes to get someone to Topeka, because they're not coming here always just for the conference. I think a lot of people, if you've been to a conference, you know that the idea of sitting in a room for 8 hours a day, 3 days, and learning might make your head explode a little bit. So you want to have some fun when you're there as well. From a historical standpoint, I agree with virtually everything that's been said today. I enjoy history as well. I've had some good conversations with some of the people that have been up here already to talk. What's important to Visit Topeka is that we are able to piece all those stories together to tell a total story about what Topeka is. I think no different than the Evel Knievel Museum, in a silo, each individual place might not be the best tourism draw on its own, but if we can piece them all together, then that's what's going to make people want to come. So we have to figure out what that story is and how everything ties together. Luckily, most of the organizations that have already talked are tied together in some sort of way, whether it's civil rights or freedom or equality. One thing that Visit Topeka would like to do with some of this money is we would like to help them as the Tourism Alliance or the historical group to build a better website and possibly build an app and help them be able to market everybody as a whole. And so we can advertise to people from out of the community that if you come here, you're going to have an entire day of history. And it's not just everybody fighting for themselves. We want everybody to be able to work together. I think the last thing, the application process, I kind of touched on this. I think, I believe that it could be a good idea to do an application to kind of be able to judge apples to apples. If that was going to happen, whether we use the one from the past or there's a different one, I would just volunteer Visit Topeka to be involved and we could help because there are some important questions that should be on that application of what the organizations are going to do to better themselves after the dust is settled and everything's built out. How are they going to market that appropriately? How many events do they think that they're going to have? How are they going to work with the other organizations around town to try to stretch the trip out? Like I said, everything that we're trying to do right now is to figure out how do we get the people to Topeka to begin with, and once they're here, how do we get them to stay here long enough till the sun goes down and it's time to go stay in a hotel.
Okay.
So that is all I have.
Thank you,
Questions?
Brett. You have a huge job.
Yeah, you do.
Thank you. Well, I would consider or to entertain a motion that we adopt a process, what that process might be, if we want a motion to discuss, or I think we can come up with the application process being a form and then determining what the criteria are. I know staff did put together some questions for establishing what the criteria would be to determine the funding appropriation. And we could entertain those questions or maybe have staff develop that and send it out for review and then look at it. So, or we can just close this meeting and then have that information and vote on it later. What would staff prefer to do? Mary?
Let me just, it might be easier to come to some kind of a consensus and direct staff as to where you want them to go as opposed to making a formal motion. I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, so we don't need a motion at this meeting. We'll just direct staff to develop that process.
Just reach a consensus and then direct staff, yes.
Okay.
I think it would be an excellent idea if it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, if we can include staff person from Visit Topeka, maybe some from the Lodging Association, and then someone from the Historical Alliance as part of a larger review committee with us included. Obviously, they have much more expertise in these different areas than I do, and I would be very interested in hearing their input on some of it. So as part of, ask staff to develop a process with a form and then put together a recommendation for a review committee.
Okay.
With that additional expertise and resources. Your thoughts?
I like that. Are we directing them on what questions to put on there, or will they draft that themselves? What's your take on that?
I think they have some specific questions that they've come up with already, so those would be developed in that criteria.
I think something along the lines of, possible estimated, people through the door of your venue, or, how they intend to position themselves so we do have overnight stays, would be good too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other biggest thing is, in all of this stuff we do, there's a lot of folks that are asking for money, and we don't have a lot to go around. And I think our focus should be do what we can to get these things done, especially since we're setting up funding for the better part of, well, more than a decade, frankly. To just give tiny bits of money here and there over the course of 12 years is probably not going to really help a lot of these folks get their venues done. So one thing I would ask for is, where are you going to get the rest of the money? Or what is your plan? What is your goal? Because the idea behind us kicking in a chunk of this cash is that that's enough to jumpstart the projects, to really, laying down the foundational fundraising to get them open. Because obviously our goal is we all want to see all of these venues open, because that's only going to build the Topeka that we all know and love.
Okay, so does staff have direction then? And the timeline, I think we also need to touch on that. October was a date that I heard that we need to have all of this done.
Yes, if you all want to look at the memo that was sent to you, I think you have it in front of you too. The timeline that we laid out actually ideally would be pretty aggressive, and the main reason is that for the charter ordinance that officially extends the 1%, that actually should go before the larger council. We put on here around September 1st, and the reason is that there's a required 60-day protest period for a charter ordinance. There's no vote required, but there is a requirement anytime there's a charter ordinance renewal that there has to be time for the public to give input. So really, to back into that September 1st date, what we were really hoping for is that a process could be set in place in the next few weeks, and that maybe even by the August 5th, the next TGT meeting that you all already have set up, we might even already have applications submitted and already reviewed from the committee, and be able to show you all the results so you can maybe even take action. If that all doesn't fall into place exactly like that, we have a little bit of wiggle room, but if you go any later, if you go to October, you really don't have time to renew the charter ordinance, submit it to the state in time to collect that 1%. And you miss out on, they do it on the quarter. So if you don't meet that deadline, the 1% can still be extended, but what might happen is that it falls off between January and April. So you just lose out on that revenue source. And I think it's confusing to fluctuate the TGT rates for the hotel. It goes from 7 to 6 and then back up to 7 potentially. So there is a reason for the pretty aggressive timeline. You could do the charter ordinance with the larger governing body and extend that 1%. We could take that anytime, but let them know that the details would be lined out about who gets it would be lined out at a different time. I think we just all agree ideally they would have those details at the same time they're voting on the charter ordinance, so that everyone knows exactly what they're voting on.
Is being that aggressive a problem with anybody out there?
Did everyone get this memo?
No, I think
can we make this available to?
Sure. I think we wanted to make sure you all were good with it, and if that's okay, then we can make it available. We'll post it online. But it seemed to us that everybody, and especially from speaking today, already had in their mind the dollar amount. They've maybe already given it. They've already got good proposals. We've even already received some, even unsolicited. So we were thinking that that time would be appropriate and that everybody's pretty much ready to go.
So ideally, what we would like to do is have something posted online or sent out to interested parties outlining the questions that you all have talked about today that you would want to know from the applicants. And then once that is sent in to us by perhaps July 31st, and then we can work with the committee or the review committee to establish what the recommendations would be.
So if we go with this timeline, the timeline is basically today we're supposed to determine the process. The 31st applications from interested parties and organizations are due to the city manager's office. And then August 5th, staff provides recommendations to the TGT committee, who will then discuss, amend, or approve. September 1st, council passes charter ordinance that includes details of how the 1% is spent. And then September 7th, it's publication in the Metro News. So in other words, that's what sets all this in motion. So what we would need then is the applications from the interested parties by July 31st. And the criteria, then recommend application question and criteria. There's a couple of things here that determine how this is going to be done. that staff have already put together, and I'm just going to read these off real quickly so that you kind of have an idea of what is going to be expected. We recommend the following questions to be answered in each application. How will the funds be spent? What is the exact dollar amount requested, and what is the minimum amount of funding required? How does the project provide economic development and tourism benefits to the city? What is the total budget for your project, and what portion is being funded by TGT? What is the return on investment to the city in terms of direct and indirect benefit, including leverage of non-TGT dollars? What is the timeline of your project and plans? And the last question, is there additional information and/or materials, including pictures or other details, that would be helpful to the committee? So I think the staff has come up with some really good questions or criteria that we would establish once those applications are received. And then we would go to a review, whether we added people from the Tourism Alliance and Visit Topeka for that review process. Is that correct? Am I stating all this correctly? Okay. So I think we've come up with a process then, and that was our intent today, and we've come up with a timeline that's going to have that be put into motion. So is there anything else that we need to discuss before we adjourn? Okay. There's one question, John?
Yeah, just to be clear, you're giving everybody 11 days to answer all of those questions and get that back to you, and some groups don't even have a copy of that yet?
It's a good question.
And then to get to their boards and have meetings set up?
Okay, that's a very good question. So is that what we would be doing, that they'd have to have their proposal presented with all of these questions answered? Or the other thing could be that these are the questions that the review committee is going to use to determine the whether it's a proposal that needs to be considered into the 1%, rather than addressing all of these. We don't have a grant with all of the other grant applications that we have a grant process that has to be met. This is a little bit different because it's 1% funding that before the council has voted on without any formal process for the application. But can we extend that date?
This was backing ended. You all have a TGT meeting already set for August 5th. That's really the only reason that we set this up, is we were backing into that. If you were willing to maybe move that date back even to the middle of August or later in August, then we can adjust the timeline to back into that. That's really the only reason for that really aggressive, is we were trying to meet that August 5th.
Okay.
But if everybody needs a little bit more time, if a month would be more sufficient than 11 days, I think we can work with you all to reschedule that and amend the timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we bump the meeting back to August 19th, that gives everyone an additional
2 weeks.
Is that enough?
Okay,
I mean,
Chris.
guys, if it's not, tell us, and we'll try to accommodate, really, but.
Chris has a comment.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I know Friends of Recent Capital would work with whatever dates you've got, but I wonder if you'd also consider, if the committee would consider, as you direct staff to fill questions, I hate to do this to Brett, but it would really help. The toughest question is how many people come through the door? And I know Brett knows, none of us are tourism agencies. So it's very important for us to have from the tourism agency what comes through the door. I mean, we know that Civil War Heritage, our little group knows that Civil War Heritage tourism is the most lucrative thing. I mean, that's been determined, shared and mentioned, among many other forms of tourism, not all, but we don't have access to that data. So if there's any help that they could offer in answering those questions, not for us, but generally, that would be great.
Okay, to reword what you're saying is basically that we need Visit Topeka to help us with the numbers of people that come to Topeka for historic tourism reasons.
Thank you.
Is that, I mean, I don't know how other than we know that the state capitol is, the zoo's first on the list, and then the state capitol is next on the number of tourists. So is there a way we can track historical tourism?
We get more info from each individual organization. So I don't know. I could try. I don't know how I can do something.
But in essence, we could add up the number of people that come to Overland Station, to Capitol, are both historic sites. Ritchie House,
Yeah, I don't.
Brown v. Board.
Those are different sites with different draws, though. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know, and I think that's fine. I mean, some of these, there isn't going to be a way to estimate because they don't know exactly how and what they can do because they've never had access to the amount of funding necessary to really even get started. So, I would say leave the question on there. If you don't know, it won't count against you. If you can make some estimates based on the interest that your program or project has generated in the community, that's great. And maybe it's as simple as how many inquiries do you get, a week on the project or something like that. Because I see the idea says, how can we gauge interest in the project? But, they're correct. Estimating some of the people through the doors on a project that's just barely, getting off the ground is going to be rather difficult. I agree.
Okay.
So.
Staff, Brandon, do you have any comments to make to that idea that we can't really track numbers at this point? Okay. Okay. John?
May I?
Sure.
Thank you, John Hunter, Heartland Visioning. And I speak from years of large project development. I caution you to get caught up in a dialogue about trying to come up with questions that are going to provide you with all the answers. You have an opportunity to make a change in this city, truly an opportunity. There is no panacea with one of these projects that it is going to be the end all. But in a collaborative effort of bringing together a plaza, the Riverfront Park, the Jayhawk Theater, the historic components that have been missing in this community, keep working to bring those all together and we will find success. If you set up a situation, and I do understand the idea of heads on beds, but I might argue that if that's your rationale and you get each one of these groups to start making up figures for you, estimates, I can't even imagine how the Oregon Trail Park in front of the Great Overland Station, what are they going to tell you? They're going to pick up and just say, well, these national parks provide this many heads on beds. Is that the correct estimate for Topeka? I don't think you should be making judgment on that. The suggestion about coming up with this process is great. And maybe for next year, it's absolutely the right thing to do. But I would ask you to think about positive risk, that this is an opportunity to take a risk, to believe in all of these people that are out here who are these are visionary volunteers who are saying to you, we have projects going. We are taking the right steps to develop proper project managing. Many of us on these projects are already working directly with the city, be it neighborhood development, be it with Jim Colson on the park, on Jayhawk Theater. It's not like we don't have a good collaboration already going on. So I would really encourage you to maybe take a little step back from overcommitting yourself to how answers are appearing on questions on that piece of paper, and not go to the point where you start setting these groups up against one another. This is a much bigger opportunity for all of us. And I can tell you, Heartland Visioning is involved in a surveying process throughout the city. The early responses right now speak to, yes, a continued interest in moving forward all of the major projects that people started talking about 4, 5, 6 years ago. They want our downtown to be finished. They want the Riverfront Park to be finished. I will tell you that our investigations into developing NIAs into the downtown area has begun to open our eyes into the potential of what we have here in terms of history development for this city. I think the opening this door to the whole Oregon Trail process is going to enlighten all of us about a history that we have sort of ignored for most of our time as a city, and I think we have an opportunity to do something. So again, I would simply encourage you, to become visionaries, to think big, to don't get caught in a quagmire of an individual process, because there's not a single one of these wonderful projects that are going to be the end-all panacea.
Sure.
Keep them together, move this city forward, and that's when we'll accomplish all the heads on beds that all of us are hoping for. Thank you.
I would throw in one thing. I don't want there to be a process next year, because I want us to do this right and have it in place for the next 12 years so you guys can go out and get your work done instead of coming back again and again and again to renew. So I appreciate your comments on the forum next year, but I think we need to do this now for the duration of the 12 or the 1%.
So with the new date of August 19th, was that the new
Well-
idea that the proposals would be in?
Well, if we move the meeting that was supposed to be on the 5th to the 19th, that backs it up 2 weeks. So here was our meeting, then we back it up here. And that just gives additional time before we.
2 weeks from July 31st?
Right.
Okay, so August 15th, August
Yeah.
14th?
So.
Is that sound reasonable? Okay.
Which is it, 14th to the 15th?
Is it, could I ask, is there going to be an application online that people would use, Megan?
Yes, what we can do is prepare a memo or document that we can post online that will outline all the questions that need to be answered in the application.
And when would that be posted? When you
We
have a
can have it
sense?
posted tomorrow,
Okay.
assuming the committee agrees with these questions outlined and the 2 additional questions you've suggested. We can post that as soon as possible.
And I would advocate that we don't make any of them mandatory, because I think John makes excellent points. If you don't have information, just tell us. Don't make it up. And then our goal is the application shows interest, and then basically tell us about your project, and then we'll sit down and try to package it together and build something for our community. I mean, I think that's really what we're all trying to do, right, is collectively come together and say, we're going to move Topeka forward over the next 10 years, and we're going to do it in an awesome fashion.
Chris?
Could the question be, what are the potential sources of funding, or is that covered already in there? Such as Mr. Glenn mentioned, there are, what sources of funding is it possible for each of these projects to access?
I don't know why not. I think that's a good question.
That is a good question.
There is a question that states, what is the total budget for your project and what portion is being funded by TGT? So that could.
Could we just expand out and ask where the rest of your funding you
where's the
expect
rest
to
of
come
the
from?
funding coming from?
And not specifically other sources. May there be, in addition to local and state and federal government funding?
Well, and I think the gist of the question is, we don't have enough TGT money to fund an entire part of one project, or an entire project. So the idea is that we as the committee need to know that you guys are capable of going out and getting the rest of the funding to get the project going, because otherwise it doesn't do any good to invest money in a project that there isn't a way to get it going. Am I correct?
Although, did the Overland Station or Sunflower Soccer have to answer the questions about where's the rest of your funding coming from?
No, there was really no application process
Okay.
for
Okay.
Sunflower Soccer.
Okay.
And what codifies, there were resolutions that outlined how the money would be
Going to be
spent
spent.
if the charter ordinance was passed. And so I would anticipate something similar would happen in this case. You would select who you want, and then a resolution would be passed by the council saying, identifying the amount of money and the agency.
Well, if I was sitting out in the audience, one of the questions I would ask would be, when is this money going to be available? If it was bonded out, when would it be distributed then?
Councilmember, we receive TGT money by the quarter, so anything for any tax that would be implemented in January, those funds wouldn't be available till April of 2016 at the earliest. For bonding purposes, there's too many unknowns really to be talking about bonding, including taxability of the bonds if it goes to private uses. So
Okay.
there's too many unknowns there to.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we're past our time. We've had the good discussion. We've got the date set as to the process, and then we would come back together on August 19th to finish the discussion and formalize the process of determining where the 1% would go for the next 12 years. Is that correct? So, okay. Well, with that, we're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.